Maybe you're like me, you've been thinking about some off-road touring. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the Surly ECR. I blame this largely on my friend Jerry because he's responsible for taking me out on a big tire bike over the New Year's Christmas holiday. If you remember back and you looked at some of the videos, you know that I was riding a Surly Ogre over that time period. And those bigger tires, they just really seem to grow on you. So I began to consider, what would I think about having a bike for off-road touring? And we all know you can do a lot of things on a regular bike on most locations. So it's not like you have to have a mountain bike to pull these things off with bigger tires, but certainly it makes life a little easier and makes you a little more relaxed when you want to hop those curbs or those routes or drive over a bunch of big rocks or float across some muddy terrain or sandy beaches, let's say. So I began to investigate what kind of bikes out there to look at, and from the touring perspective, because I like to carry a lot of gear, certainly the Fargo came up, the Ogre, and of course the ECR. After looking at all of these, I really kind of began to love the Surly brand as a whole, and while it's not perfect, it certainly comes with a lot of good quality components overall, and functionality wise, it's very functional. In most instances, people would consider it to be quite the tank of a build. So when Surly came out and said, oh, the 2020 model is going to be tank green, it really kind of spoke to me a little bit, if I'm honest about it. So I placed an order with my local bike shop, Waltz Bikes. You've heard us maybe talk about it before, and Waltz did a great job of getting the bike in, getting it set up, and it came exactly as I had anticipated, which most of the time is a 1x12 setup with 3-inch by 29-inch Nard tires from Surly. Malaco handlebars, and you get to put your own choice of pedals on, and comes with a WTB seat, but of course I replaced that with my Brooks saddle that I've been using for quite some time. So what do I think overall? Well, it is truly built like a tank, not to be a surprise to anyone. It's a big, heavy bike. A little bit longer overall than the Ogre, and certainly those 3-inch, 29-inch wheels and tires are just great for floating over rocks and roots and even softening that ride a little bit as you go down the trail. Certainly I don't need it for most of the riding that I'm doing currently, but I hope to get a little more adventurous and take this ECR out and do a few more things. So the first thing I did when I got the bike at Waltz was to go ahead and have them put on a rack, and I chose the Bontrager back rack. Now that's a rack I've been using on the FX3, which has been a great rack and has worked well on that bike. But the new Bontrager back rack is minor modifications to it, a little bit heavier duty change to it, but overall I think it's going to be great. It fits just perfectly on the ECR without a problem. So I went ahead and got that added on, and on top of that I just really moved most of my stuff off of the other bike. I continued to use the race face pedals and the Brooks saddle, of course, as I said, but also all of the gear that I have, the frame bag and all of the stuff that I normally use will all fit just fine on that large frame, which is what I wound up going with. If you're thinking about an ECR, you really need to think about fit because it is a little bit different, I think, but overall I'm a 34 inseam and I found the large fit just fine. So what do I think overall? Well, certainly that big heavy bike, the ride, the fact that it's made of steel, yeah, it's pretty supple, as many would say. I've enjoyed putting about 75 to 100 miles, somewhere in between there, on the bike, and it's largely been a little bit of off-road, some road, some muddy, snowy, icy trail riding, and the 3-inch Nards have been great. You can deflate them just a little bit, soften them up, and they'll float over just about anything you want to do, or you can blow them up and tighten them up to 35 psi and roll down the road pretty well. It is going to have that four-wheel drive hum of the tires as you're going down pavement, but you know, there's something that's kind of appealing about that. Overall, do I see any weaknesses? Well, I think the paint on these bikes is probably not as good as maybe some other bikes have. I've already begun to see places where I think there could be wear. But I think you can combat that by putting some clear tape or something in strategic locations. But also, it's a mountain bike that's meant to be banged around. I mean, it is a tank. So I'm not afraid to wear it down just a little bit. It came with the 1x12 SRAM Eagle system, and so far, knock on wood, it's been fantastic. Shifts smooth, if you're familiar with that. It's a 1x12 cassette with a little bit narrower chain, and that Eagle shifter, though, has been great. No problems so far. Obviously, Waltz did a great job when they set it up, so there's been no problems as far as that goes. But, you know, I'm sure it'll need a tune-up at some point after it kind of goes through the break-in period. You know, the bike comes with disc brakes all the way around, and Avid is kind of the standard mechanical disc brake that they use on the Surleys, and those have been pretty good so far. No major problems. I know there are some that complain of noise and maybe not as good a stopping power on the Avids, but I personally haven't seen that so far. But like I said, 75 to 100 miles. The other thing I'm not particularly crazy about is with the geometry, the Malaco bars. So I'm at the top of my spacers right now, and I still feel like I need a little more reach back towards me a little bit. And rather than go with an adjustable stem, I've just about made up my mind that I'm going to go with the Jones bars and do the 2.5-inch lift and play around with that a little bit, see how I like it. While the Malacos fit a little differently on the FX3, on this bike I find they just not quite there, and I don't really want to do the adjustable stem. So I'm going to place an order for those Jones bars with the rise and play around with that a little bit. I'll let you know how that comes out and how I like that. The grips that come by stock on the ECR are kind of just hard rubber grips. I think they could be softened up a little bit. They're quite functional, obviously, but I've decided to probably go with some of the just Jones foam grips that are going to be with those bars. And I think other than that, right now, I don't really have any other major changes that I'd like to make. I'm happy, obviously, with my Brooks saddle. That's been a no-brainer for me for a long time now. So I went out the other day, I put about 2.5 hours on the bike, and I can tell you that the comfort that comes from riding it is improved over the FX3. Just, I think, weight, tires, I get the bars kind of tuned in a little closer to what I want. I think I can really put a lot of hours and miles on the bike across, obviously, varied terrain. The low gear in this bike is plenty of climbing. If you can't climb with the granny gear that's in this bike, then you need to just walk probably, because it is a super low gear for the granny. But that 1x12 does give you a ton of variety and plenty of highway speed if you want to roll fast down the road. So I'm very happy with that so far. We'll see how that wears over time. Maybe my opinion will change, but right now it's been good. Overall, I think it's a great bike. A ton of braze-ons and locations. You can mount as much stuff, carry as much gear. It's built like a tank, and it's in tank green, so that's always good. Overall, I'm happy so far. I'm looking forward to rolling some miles. End of February, Jerry and I plan to go make a bike trip and put it through its paces, so I'll try to make some video for you so you can kind of follow along. I hope this has been helpful, and if you have questions about the ECR, anything that maybe I can answer, feel free to leave comments in the description. I'll see if I can help out. Like I said, I only have 75 to 100 miles so far, so I'm still learning the bike a lot myself, but I'm looking forward to really putting a lot more miles on it. So thanks for watching. See you again soon.